For years, some people believed they could bend the law to their will, using it as a weapon to humiliate, intimidate, and erase anyone who didn't belong in their carefully curated world. They thought no one would stand up to them. They were wrong. Tonight, you're about to witness a story of courage, resilience, and unbreakable love. A family forced to fight for their very right to exist in the place they called home. You'll feel their fear, their heartbreak, their rage, and ultimately their triumph. Every moment is a pulse of tension, every second a test of how far people will go to protect what's theirs. Before we dive in, tell me where in the world you're watching from, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss a single heartbeat of this story, because what happens here will make your heart ache, your blood boil, and your spirit soar. For years, Officer Kane and his men twisted the law into a weapon. They patrolled the streets of the sleepy town of Willow Creek not to protect, but to intimidate, mocking and driving out anyone who didn't fit their narrow vision of who belonged. Their arrogance had grown unchecked until the day they confronted Marcus Taylor, a burly 42-year-old former Navy SEAL, in front of his wife Maria and their 10-year-old daughter Lily. Kane sneered, unaware of the storm he had provoked. Marcus's jaw tightened, calm as a coiled spring. Years of combat had taught him patience, but also precision. One wrong move from them, one cruel word, and it would be their undoing. Maria's hand trembled against his arm, sensing the tension that made the warm afternoon air thrum with silent danger. They had chosen the wrong man. They had no idea how far this family's courage could reach. Marcus Taylor guided their old, familiar SUV along the winding lanes of Willow Creek, the golden light of late afternoon spilling across the neat brick homes that lined the streets. His heart swelled as he approached the modest two-story home they had finally secured, after months of savings, paperwork, and dreams that had often felt just out of reach. In the back seat, Lily practically vibrated with excitement, her small fists gripping the seatbelt. "Can I really paint my room pink with rainbow stripes?" she asked for the third time, eyes wide with the pure, unfiltered hope only a child could carry. Maria smiled from the passenger seat, the sunlight catching the gentle curve of her cheek. "Within reason, baby. Maybe not rainbow stripes all over the ceiling," she teased, laughter in her voice. Lily giggled, a sound that made Marcus's chest tighten with warmth and pride. Parking in front of their new home, Marcus inhaled deeply. The air felt different here, cleaner, lighter than the stale hum of their old apartment. And yet the peace carried an invisible weight. Across the street, a couple tended their garden, pausing to stare at the Taylors' moving car. Their glances lingered just long enough to make Marcus's military instincts flare, a subtle tingle running down the back of his neck. Maria noticed it too, brushing her hand against his. "We belong here," he whispered, gripping her fingers firmly. He held up the crisp deed in his other hand, the paper still faintly smelling of ink and possibility. "This is ours. Our home now." They began unloading groceries, Lily insisting on carrying the lighter bags, hopping on tiptoe, determined to help. Maria balanced her share of bags with practiced care, her mind spinning with relief and concern. "No more sharing a tiny bedroom with all your stuffed animals," she murmured. Lily squealed, already imagining the pillows, fairy lights, and secret reading nook she would create. Marcus watched them, feeling a swell of fierce pride and the bittersweet ache of sacrifice. Every obstacle, every denied apartment, every bureaucratic rejection had led them here. This home, these walls, were more than bricks and mortar. They were a sanctuary built on determination and love. But peace in Willow Creek was fragile. Marcus's trained gaze swept the neighborhood subtly. An elderly man briskly crossing the street. Two women with strollers whispering and glancing their way. Nothing overt, nothing threatening. Yet Marcus felt the currents of hostility lurking beneath polite suburban facades. Maria's eyes met his, searching, understanding, as they carried groceries inside. Their quiet intimacy was punctuated by small, shared jokes, the rhythmic rustle of bags and laughter, but a tension lingered, coiling just beneath the surface. Inside, the house began to transform from empty rooms to a home. Lily darted up and down the stairs, marking spots for her toys and books. Every piece of furniture and box unpacked felt like a claim staked, a declaration of belonging. Marcus ran his fingers over the deed repeatedly. The words, Marcus Taylor, Maria Taylor, Lily Taylor, property owners, printed boldly in black ink. The American dream had been elusive for so long, but now it was tangible, pulsing in the space around them. Yet the shadows outside whispered that belonging would not come easily. Maria paused in the kitchen, arranging cereal boxes with methodical care. "I just want her to be happy here," she admitted, voice low. Marcus placed a protective hand on her shoulder. His tactical mind was already mapping exits, weak points, and potential threats. Old habits die hard. The family worked in quiet sync, voices echoing in the still, sunlit rooms, filling the space with warmth that clashed with the unease that prickled the back of Marcus's neck. They shared a moment of laughter when Lily's excitement became too great. "Dad, can we get a swing set for the backyard?" she asked, eyes sparkling. Marcus smiled down at her, heart swelling. "We'll see, Princess. But first, let's make sure your fort is ready." Each laugh, each shared glance between mother and daughter, reinforced the stakes of their new life, what they had won and what they might lose. Even as joy blossomed inside, the world outside whispered of prejudice and suspicion. The neighbors' sideways glances, the silent withdrawal behind curtains, all hinted at invisible walls Marcus had learned to detect long before moving day. This wasn't just a family moving into a new house, it was a declaration of belonging in a place where their presence had been quietly resisted for generations. Lily ran to her room, measuring spaces for her bookshelf and treasure boxes, while Marcus and Maria exchanged a look of shared determination. They had built this life on resilience, on a refusal to bend under pressure. Marcus held the deed one last time before tucking it safely away, a small but potent symbol of everything they had fought for. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and sunlight, hope felt tangible, fragile, and precious. They were home. And yet, the quiet tick of unease lingered at the edges of the afternoon, a subtle reminder that belonging once claimed was never guaranteed. The afternoon's warm sunlight shifted abruptly as Marcus and Maria carried the last grocery bags inside. Their laughter and Lily's excited chatter seemed to hang in the air, fragile and sweet, but suddenly broken by the flash of red and blue lights across the front yard. Marcus froze, muscles coiling like tightly wound springs. His instincts, honed through years of military service, flared instantly. Maria's hand found his, squeezing tight. "What is it?" she whispered, the sound trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Marcus didn't answer immediately. His eyes narrowed at the street. 3 patrol cars had stopped abruptly in front of their home, tires squealing just enough to announce their presence. The doors opened in rapid succession, officers emerging with hands hovering near weapons. Marcus's chest tightened as the sound of boots on concrete echoed like a drumbeat of danger. Lily's voice called from the top of the stairs, bright but quivering. "Mom! Dad! What's happening?" She had caught sight of the flashing lights, the rigid postures, and instinctively knew the tension. Maria wrapped her arms around her daughter, trying to shield her from the spectacle outside, her own heart hammering. Through the front windows, Marcus could see the neighbors gathering, drawn to the chaos like moths to a flame. Their curiosity mingled with something darker, a satisfaction, a quiet echo of unspoken biases, as if watching them being challenged was entertainment. Marcus's jaw tightened. His broad frame moved to the porch, Maria close behind him, Lily clutching her mother's hand like a lifeline. The flashing lights painted their faces in alternating shadows of red and blue, a twisted mockery of celebration. Leading the officers was Sergeant David Collins, a tall, imposing man with graying temples and eyes that seemed to absorb light with an unnerving coldness. His voice cut across the yard, sharp and commanding. "Get out of here, now, all of you!" Marcus stepped forward, chest firm, hands relaxed but ready. "This is private property," he said, voice calm yet carrying across the silent tension of the street. "I am the homeowner." A laugh erupted from the nearest officer, sharp and cruel. "Homeowner, look at this guy," one sneered, patting his own lean stomach. "More like a warehouse." Collins' lips curled into a sneer, eyes scanning Marcus like a predator. "This is a restricted neighborhood. Your kind doesn't belong here," he spat. The word boy echoed in Marcus's ears like a physical blow, but he held his composure. He could feel Maria's fingers digging into his arm, desperate yet trusting. Marcus pulled the deed from his pocket, holding it high. "We bought this house legally. Everything is in order." Collins's eyes flicked toward the paper, but he barely glanced at it before crumpling it with disdain. "This? Fake, no doubt. Probably printed at the library. Ridiculous." Maria's voice, sharp and controlled, cut through the tension. "We have every right to be here." Another officer stepped closer, voice dripping with condescension. "Pretty uppity for a squatter, aren't you, sweetheart?" Lily's small voice rose from behind her mother. "Leave my mom alone," she shouted, trembling but fierce. Marcus's military training wrestled with his desire to remain calm. "My family lives here now. Check the records if you don't believe me." Collins's sneer deepened. "We'll check something, all right," he growled. "Carter! Briggs! Secure the suspects! They're trespassing on private property!" Everything erupted at once. Carter lunged toward Maria, slamming her face against the hood of a patrol car. Briggs shoved Lily roughly aside, sending her stumbling onto the grass. Two officers drove Marcus to the ground, knees digging into his back, pressing his cheek against the harsh concrete. Pain and instinct collided violently within him, the taste of copper filling his mouth as the officers applied force with shocking brutality. "Stop resisting!" one shouted, though Marcus remained still, controlled. "Please!" Maria cried, hands cuffed behind her back, voice tight with fear. The world narrowed to a single dangerous focus as Collins approached Marcus, his posture dripping contempt. "Not so big now, are you? Should have known your place." Something inside Marcus snapped. Years of Delta Force training surged through him like wildfire, precision honed into lethal clarity. He exploded upward, flinging the officers aside with terrifying efficiency. Elbows, strikes, momentum, everything became instinct. One officer stumbled backward, clutching his throat, while another reached for a taser too late. Briggs charged, baton raised, only to be thrown face first against a patrol car, windshield spiderwebbed in the impact. The remaining officers formed a semicircle, weapons drawn, red and blue lights flickering off their faces. Collins pulled his gun, eyes locked on Marcus. "Give me one reason. One reason." Marcus's chest heaved, muscles taut, mind cataloging angles, weaknesses, escape routes. He could see the neighbors now, phones raised, recording everything, bearing silent witness to the violence inflicted upon a family that had done nothing wrong. Maria had managed to free herself in the chaos, rushing to Lily and shielding her. Marcus's voice, low and deadly calm, cut through the tension. "You want to shoot me?" Blood from his cheek trickled down onto his collar. Collins's face twisted with fury and disbelief. Marcus held his ground, not a flinch, not a tremor, only the deadly certainty of a man defending what was his. The standoff stretched, taut as a wire, each second an eternity. The surrounding neighbors whispered, their recordings capturing a spectacle they would never forget. Marcus's fists were split and bleeding, his shirt torn, but his mind remained razor-sharp, his will unbroken. The officers, once proud, now faltered under the weight of truth and the unrelenting skill of a man they had underestimated. Collins sneered through gritted teeth, but even his bravado trembled. Marcus slowly revealed his ID, the emblem of his service catching the porch light. Commander Marcus Taylor, Delta Force, retired. The silence that followed was deafening. Witnesses held their phones steady, hearts pounding as the reality settled over them. This was no ordinary man. This was a trained soldier, a father, a protector, and they had chosen to test him. Marcus's chest heaved as he stood amid the shattered remnants of authority. Officers sprawled across the lawn like fallen predators. The taste of blood was bitter in his mouth, but sharper still was the surge of protective fury that refused to be tamed. Maria's hand pressed into his side, grounding him, while Lily clung to her mother, eyes wide with both terror and awe. "Dad, are they gone?" she whispered, small and fragile. Marcus shook his head slowly, muscles still coiled, eyes scanning the street, calculating every possible approach they might attempt next. The patrol cars remained, lights spinning in restless loops, a reminder that this nightmare was far from over. Collins and his officers were not just misguided, they were part of a system intent on terrorizing those who dared claim what was theirs. The family's dream home had become a battleground, a crucible in which innocence and love collided with greed, racism, and corruption. Marcus felt the weight of every life he was responsible for, the bright, vulnerable life of Lily, the steady and trusting heart of Maria, and he knew he could not allow them to be broken. Maria's voice trembled as she whispered, "They'll be back, won't they?" Marcus knelt to meet her eyes, his own calm but charged with a promise. "Yes," he said softly, "but they won't take what's ours. Not while I'm here." Lily looked between them, her small hands pressed to her mouth, tears already tracking streaks down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she admitted. Marcus lifted her gently into his arms, holding her close, his cheek resting atop her soft curls. "I know, baby girl, but we're together. They can't touch our hearts. Not ours, not ever." The air felt heavier now, each shadow outside their windows carrying a potential threat. Marcus guided Maria and Lily inside, securing doors and windows with deliberate care. Every sound outside, the rustle of leaves, the low hum of idling engines, was a pulse in the drumbeat of danger. Marcus's mind raced through contingency after contingency, calculating escape routes, choke points, and weaknesses. Every muscle in his body remembered the drills, the missions, the chaos of war zones. But this wasn't a battlefield of faceless enemies. This was home, and this was personal. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated by occasional distant sirens that only reminded them of the precariousness of their position. Marcus checked every security feed, noting movements of unfamiliar vehicles, recording suspicious patterns, making mental maps of potential threats. Each beep, each shadow cast against the curtains, sent adrenaline coursing anew through his veins. Maria moved quietly beside him, occasionally brushing Lily's hair back from her face, whispering reassurances that Marcus felt more than he heard. The phone buzzed. It was Jorge, Marcus's longtime friend and former unit comrade, who had agreed to stay close during the night. "They're moving again," Jorge said tersely over the line, voice low and urgent. Marcus noted the timestamps of street lights, the angles of moving patrol cars. "I see them," he replied. "They're cautious, but predictable. We'll be ready." Night deepened, wrapping the neighborhood in a deceptive calm. Marcus used the cover of darkness to prepare, gathering tactical gear that had lain dormant for years, reinforced vests, helmets, suppressed firearms, and compact tools of precision. Each piece was tested, adjusted, and positioned with obsessive care. Marcus's hands moved almost unconsciously, muscle memory guiding him as much as reason. Maria watched silently, pride and fear mingling in her eyes. She had never seen him like this, not the gentle father, not the devoted husband, but the soldier awakened to protect what was sacred. Suddenly, a sharp noise outside made Lily flinch. Marcus moved first, then turned to Maria, whispering, "Stay here. Keep her safe." Lily's small voice trembled as she asked, "Are you going to fight again?" Marcus lifted her chin gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Yes, but it's for us, for you, for Mom, and for every family who deserves to live without fear." The movement came as predicted. 5 masked figures, tactical gear glinting faintly under the dim streetlights. Marcus's pulse steadied, vision narrowing to clarity, every instinct screaming through the years of training that had made him who he was. 2 carried pistols, 3 carried batons. Their approach was precise, showing discipline, but their confidence betrayed them. Marcus's mind cataloged every angle, every possible path. He stepped into the night, weapon in hand, shadow among shadows. His first movement was explosive yet controlled, a blur of motion as he neutralized the nearest threat with precise force, disarming without hesitation. The second man lunged, but Marcus's elbow and knee found exact targets, sending him sprawling into the asphalt. The attackers barely had time to react as Marcus moved with lethal efficiency, every strike measured, every defensive maneuver pre-planned yet executed instinctively. Gunfire erupted. Marcus dove behind the hood of his SUV, bullets pinging off metal, glass shattering like ice. "Stay back!" he shouted toward the house, though his voice carried little beyond the chaos. He could see Maria and Lily through the window, eyes wide, fear etched across their faces. He could not allow harm to touch them, not even a glancing injury. He adjusted his position, pivoting to cover multiple angles, marking every approach. The masked attackers underestimated him, and the consequences were immediate. One fell to a precise shot to the knee, and another was thrown violently into a nearby tree. Marcus moved through the night with a terrifying grace, his presence like a ghost, each action a testament to training and righteous fury. At the same time, Marcus maintained awareness of the neighborhood around him. Aware of the neighbors now watching, recording on their phones, some horrified, some shocked, some silently applauding the skill and courage of a man defending his family. Every movement was deliberate, every action sending a message. No injustice would go unanswered here. He finally subdued the last attacker, disarming and restraining him without a single misstep. The street fell into an eerie quiet, punctuated only by distant sirens and the ragged breaths of the remaining combatants. Marcus lowered his weapons, chest heaving, body slick with sweat and blood, but eyes still sharp. He turned toward the house. Maria and Lily emerged, clinging to each other, shaken but unharmed. Marcus held them both, relief washing over him, though tension still lingered. "This isn't over," he whispered to them, voice steady but low, carrying the weight of promise. "Not until justice is served, not until we can live without fear." Maria buried her face against his chest, trembling but resolute. Lily nestled close, her small arms wrapping around her mother and father, finding courage in their presence. In that moment, the street was silent, except for the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening wind. The family stood together, unbroken, a unit forged in fear and sharpened by love. The attackers were defeated, but the truth remained. Their battle had only begun. Marcus's gaze swept over the neighborhood, noting patterns, preparing for the inevitable next move. They were not alone, yet the system itself had shown its capacity for cruelty. He would fight with every tool, every skill, every ounce of his being to protect what was theirs. And above all, he would ensure that Lily grew up believing in safety, love, and justice. things worth defending with the entirety of one's heart and soul. Morning broke over the quiet neighborhood, sunlight spilling into the Reeds' yard, casting long shadows over the remnants of the previous night's chaos. Marcus moved with deliberate care, surveying the driveway, noting splintered wood, dented metal, and the scattered evidence of their violent encounter. Maria appeared beside him, cradling Lily, whose small face was still etched with worry. "Are you really going out again?" she asked softly, fear threading her voice. Marcus knelt to brush a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "I have to. They've already shown how far they'll go. If we don't expose them, no one else will." The weight of responsibility pressed on him, heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Every choice mattered. Every misstep could endanger not just his family, but the truth itself. Marcus loaded his old tactical vest with precision, checking each magazine, each device, ensuring that nothing would betray him. Every tool was a lifeline, a bridge between danger and justice. "Stay close," he instructed, though his words were more reassurance than command. "I'll be back before you know it." Maria nodded, swallowing hard, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and terror. The city was waking slowly, unaware of the orchestration of power and corruption that thrived just beneath its streets. Marcus's first stop was Jorge's workshop, where maps, camera feeds, and historical documents had been compiled with meticulous care. Jorge met him at the door, eyes sharp, body coiled with the quiet intensity of someone who had faced danger countless times before. "They're moving assets again," Jorge said, nodding toward the screens. "We need to track them before they erase everything." Marcus leaned in, studying the monitors. Surveillance footage of city officials and uniformed officers showed subtle movements: unmarked cars, suspicious stops, casual exchanges that masked calculated actions. He could almost trace the web of collusion, each thread leading back to decades of deceit and abuse. His pulse quickened, not from fear, but from purpose. Every detail was another piece of the puzzle, another opportunity to turn the tide in favor of truth. By mid-morning, Marcus had gathered a small arsenal of evidence: property deeds dating back 50 years, photographs of historically black neighborhoods systematically displaced, and documents indicating a direct lineage of corruption linking city officials to law enforcement complicity. Jorge handed him an encrypted phone, loaded with contacts from Marcus's former unit, men who owed favors, who could act swiftly if the situation demanded. "You'll need these," Jorge said, tone grave. "They're watching. Every move you make will be scrutinized." Marcus nodded, the familiar sensation of tactical readiness washing over him. His mind cataloged escape routes, choke points, and contingencies. Every step was pre-planned, every possible scenario accounted for, and yet, underneath it all, the fear for his family never dissipated. He carried it with him, a constant pulse, a reminder of what was at stake. The first target was an abandoned warehouse by the river, a place Marcus had scouted days before. Through the night vision on his modified cameras, he could see guards pacing predictable paths, confident in their assumed superiority. Marcus noted every pattern: the way one leaned against a dumpster, the casual glance at a phone, the slight pause at the corner of the building. He whispered updates to Jorge, who guided him in real time, looping camera feeds and providing backup where needed. Inside the warehouse, the air was stale and thick with decay. Dust coated every surface, and the floorboards creaked with ominous regularity. Marcus moved like a shadow, silent, precise, every step guided by years of training. He neutralized each guard with exacting efficiency, ensuring that no one would raise an alarm prematurely. Muscle memory guided him as much as strategy, blending instinct with deliberate planning. Finally, Marcus reached the office where Angela was being held. She was bound to a chair, her face bruised, but her eyes blazed with defiance. Relief washed over him, mingled with anger at the audacity and cruelty that had brought them to this point. "I'm here," he whispered, moving swiftly to release her. Angela's voice trembled, not with fear, but with fierce resolve. "Let's make them pay." They moved carefully through the building, covering each angle, disabling security measures, and documenting evidence. Each room revealed layers of complicity, files detailing property seizures, false police reports, and financial records tying city officials to decades of land appropriation. Marcus's heart ached with the weight of it. The sheer scale of injustice, the generations of lives disrupted, the deliberate erasure of history. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting harsh light on a city oblivious to the crimes it had tolerated. Marcus and Angela worked in concert, a silent language of trust forged through shared pain and survival. Every movement was deliberate, every glance loaded with unspoken understanding. Lily, safe with Jorge's family, was unaware of the intricacies unfolding, yet her presence loomed over them, a reminder of why every action mattered. As they secured the last room, Marcus held up a folder, evidence of decades of corruption and oppression. "This is it," he said, voice low but steady. "This proves everything. From the church burned down in '64 to the families displaced over the years. Every document, every photograph, every deed. They can't hide it now." Angela's hand found his, squeezing tightly. "It's more than just our home," she whispered. "It's justice for all of them." Marcus nodded, understanding the depth of her words. Each file was more than paper. It was a testament to resilience, to the courage of those who had fought and perished without recognition. The weight of history pressed upon them, heavy and urgent, and yet, amid the darkness and the danger, a sense of righteous hope began to bloom. They moved carefully back toward the entry, covering their tracks, ensuring that the evidence could reach a wider audience. Marcus's fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of knowing that every action taken now could irrevocably alter lives, not just their own, but those of countless others. Every stolen opportunity, every life displaced, could finally be acknowledged, documented, and vindicated. In the streets surrounding the warehouse, Marcus noted the positions of unmarked cars and potential threats. He transmitted live feeds to trusted allies, ensuring that the moment they emerged, the network of corruption would be visible to the world. The weight of truth, so long buried, was finally being lifted. As they exited, sunlight glinting off broken glass and rusted metal, Marcus turned to Angela. "We did what we had to do," he said softly. "This isn't just about survival. It's about making them accountable." Angela's gaze met his, full of pride, exhaustion, and the unyielding strength of love. "We're not just saving ourselves," she replied. "We're honoring them. Every family tried to erase, every life they destroyed." The streets now seemed quieter, yet charged with possibility. Marcus and Angela knew that exposure alone would not end the threat, but it would ignite a force far greater than themselves. The power of truth, the resilience of a community, the collective outrage of a city finally confronting its past. Back at the house, Lily ran into Marcus's arms, her small body trembling, but her eyes shining. "You got Mommy?" she asked, voice choked. Marcus hugged her tightly. "Yes, baby girl. Mommy's safe, we're together, and no one can take that away." Maria emerged from the shadows, her face streaked with tears and sweat, yet glowing with the quiet triumph of survival and justice. Together the family stood on the porch, the house behind them scarred but resilient, the evidence of corruption now secure in their hands. It was more than a home. It was a beacon, a statement, a stand against decades of oppression. Every neighbor who had watched the previous night's chaos would soon see not just fear, but courage, resilience, and the power of refusing to bow to injustice. Marcus breathed deeply, feeling the sun's warmth on his face. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with risk, but one thing was clear: they were no longer passive victims. They were witnesses, defenders, and carriers of truth. And that truth, long suppressed, would finally see the light. The warehouse loomed like a monument to decades of secrecy and oppression, rusted beams creaking under the weight of years, shattered windows reflecting the pale moonlight. Marcus crouched in the shadows, his eyes scanning the perimeter through night vision lenses, every fiber of his body taut with awareness. Every detail mattered: the patrol patterns, the guard rotations, the locations of surveillance cameras. His mind ran through decades of tactical training, Delta Force operations, and battlefield instincts, calculating every angle, every contingency. Angela was behind him, bound by ropes, but alert, her spirit unbroken despite the bruises on her face. She had stared down men with guns pressed to her temple, yet the fire in her eyes refused to fade. Marcus whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Stay calm. We move fast, precisely and together. Trust me." She nodded, drawing strength from his presence, from the certainty that he would never let harm come to them. The first guard moved lazily along a predictable path, cigarette in hand, unaware of the shadow coiling silently just beyond his line of sight. Marcus approached, muscle memory guiding each movement. Within moments, the guard was neutralized, secured with zip ties, and rendered unable to trigger an alarm. One by one, the others fell to Marcus's precise, silent efficiency. Every move was deliberate, every strike calculated. This was not vengeance. It was a methodical reclaiming of control from the hands of those who had abused it. Finally, Marcus reached the office where Angela had been tied. Relief surged through him, mingled with anger at the cruelty and hubris that had brought them to this point. Her hands shook slightly as he cut the ropes, but her eyes blazed with defiance. "I'm ready," she whispered. Marcus squeezed her hand. "We finish this together. No mistakes." Beyond the office, the chaos of their assault rippled outward. The men who had thought themselves untouchable were scrambling in confusion, unprepared for the precision and ruthlessness of someone trained in the highest echelons of combat. Marcus moved like a force of nature, disarming, disabling, and incapacitating, while keeping Angela and Lily protected. Every movement reflected years of practice, but each one was amplified by the emotion of what had been done to his family. The pain he refused to let go unanswered. Through the shattered windows and open doorways, Marcus could see the culmination of decades of abuse. Boxes of falsified property deeds, shredded documents, and burning files meant to erase history itself. His jaw tightened. "They thought they could bury the truth," he muttered. "They thought we would be silenced. But no one can erase this." Angela pressed close, her bruised face against his shoulder, lending silent strength. Using mirrors and camera angles, Marcus transmitted live footage to trusted allies. Every move, every confrontation, every document destroyed by Hollis and his associates was broadcast, immortalized for the world to witness. The men had underestimated him. They had assumed that fear and corruption would ensure obedience. They had been wrong. Every viewer now saw the extent of the conspiracy, the audacity of those who had thought power could shield them from accountability. Hollis, the ringleader, appeared in the office doorway, gun raised, a sneer twisting his features. "You think you can stop this?" he spat. Marcus stood firm, unflinching. "It's over. You've already lost," he said, voice steady, carrying the weight of both authority and history. Angela's eyes locked on his, a silent affirmation. Together, they could not be defeated. Hollis lunged, knife flashing. Marcus deflected, countering with precise strikes that disarmed the sergeant while minimizing harm to Angela. Grayson, the councilman implicated in decades of corruption, reached for his weapon. Marcus intercepted, his movements fluid and unerring, neutralizing threats with the precision of countless operations past. Every blow, every restraint, every step forward carried not just skill but righteous anger. Anger at the theft of their home, their dignity, and generations of stolen history. The building trembled with the sound of struggle. Files threatened to burn, alarms blared, and yet Marcus's focus never wavered. His family's safety and the preservation of evidence were absolute. With every action, the audience, whether in the room, watching through cameras, or later on social media, could feel the weight of injustice crashing against the inevitability of truth. Angela, now free, assisted where she could, her presence a reminder that courage was not the absence of fear, but the resolve to act despite it. Together they pressed forward, securing the remaining officers and retrieving the crucial documents. Marcus's hands trembled not with fear, but with the intensity of responsibility, aware that these papers held the key to exposing decades of systemic corruption. Outside, federal agents converged on the warehouse, alerted by the live feed Marcus had transmitted earlier. They arrived just as the final confrontation reached its peak, guns drawn but careful, understanding that Marcus and Angela had neutralized immediate threats without unnecessary casualties. Hollis and Grayson were detained, the weight of their crimes now tangible and inescapable. The world outside began to grasp the magnitude of what had occurred. Reporters arrived, cameras capturing every detail, every scar, every burned document, now evidence of systematic oppression. Marcus's meticulous planning ensured that no detail was lost. The story, long buried by power and intimidation, could finally emerge in full. In the quiet that followed, Marcus sat with Angela and Lily, the first true calm since the assault began. The house, scarred but standing, reflected their struggle. Broken windows, dented doors, and yet unyielding walls. They had fought not just for a home, but for dignity, for justice, for the truth that had been suppressed for generations. The evidence they secured was more than a collection of papers. It was a testament to resilience, to the courage of those who had suffered in silence, and to the determination of a family unwilling to bow. Marcus reviewed the documents, cross-referencing years of data, connecting dots that spanned decades. Every fraudulent deed, every falsified record, every act of intimidation now formed a mosaic of truth. By evening, the first news broadcasts aired footage from the warehouse showing Marcus and Angela emerging victorious, the evidence intact, the perpetrators apprehended. Social media erupted, millions viewing the clips, outrage swelling at the audacity of those who had attempted to erase history, followed by admiration for the Reeds' courage and precision. Comments poured in from around the world, voices unified in acknowledgement that this family had confronted not just immediate violence, but generations of systemic injustice. At home, Marcus held Lily tightly, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "It's over," he whispered. "We've won. Justice is finally coming." Angela's hand rested on his shoulder, bruised but unwavering. "We've shown them what it means to stand," she said softly. "And we've honored everyone who couldn't." The weight of decades lifted slightly, replaced by the fragile, powerful glow of hope. Marcus knew that rebuilding would take time. The neighborhood would heal slowly, and wounds, both physical and emotional, would remain. Yet, standing on the porch with Angela and Lily, the house scarred but alive, he felt the surge of triumph. They had reclaimed their home, their dignity, and the truth itself. This was not merely survival. It was vindication, a reclaiming of what was stolen, a promise that history would not be silenced again. As the sun set, golden light spilling across the neighborhood, Marcus looked out over the street. Neighbors emerged cautiously at first, then with growing warmth, bearing food, kind words, and recognition of the courage displayed. Children's laughter returned to the yard, echoing like a fragile hymn of resilience. The Reeds' fight had not only secured justice for themselves, but also inspired a community to reclaim dignity and honor the truth. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly neighbor who had witnessed the injustices of the past, approached with a framed photograph of the church that had once stood on the land. "This is yours now," she said, tears glistening. "Never let anyone take it from you again." Marcus accepted it reverently, the weight of generations reflected in the frame, a silent testament to all that had been lost and reclaimed. The Reeds stood together on their porch, united in love, courage, and the knowledge that they had faced unimaginable adversity and emerged stronger. The street around them, once a theater of intimidation, had become a space of solidarity, healing, and vigilance. Marcus glanced at Angela and Lily, their hands entwined, hearts aligned in purpose. Together, they had rewritten a narrative that had sought to erase them, proving that truth, courage, and love could withstand even the darkest oppression. The city would remember this day, not just for the confrontation, but for the reclaiming of history, the exposure of corruption, and the unyielding power of a family unwilling to surrender. Justice had not only been served, it had been made visible, undeniable, and permanent. The first rays of sunlight touched the Reeds' home, casting long, gentle shadows across the porch where Marcus, Angela, and Lily stood together. The air smelled of fresh dew and baked bread, a fragile reminder that life could still carry sweetness after so much fear and violence. The scars of the night before remained visible. Splintered wood on the porch, the shattered screen door, faint dark stains on the steps. Each mark was a testament to what they had endured, a reminder of the terror they had faced, and the courage that had carried them through. Neighbors began to emerge, tentative at first, peering from behind curtains and fence lines. Slowly, faces that had once displayed suspicion, indifference, or even disdain now bore expressions of admiration and gratitude. Children held small bouquets of wildflowers and handmade cards, shyly approaching the family as if to offer something pure in the midst of the lingering trauma. Angela's chest tightened as she watched Lily take a small step forward, offering a trembling but heartfelt "thank you" to a young boy from down the street. The Reeds' front yard, once a symbol of tension and fear, now began to transform into a space of connection. Neighbors carried casseroles, pots of soup, and fresh-baked bread, each offering a small act of solidarity. Mrs. Peterson, her hands shaking slightly, placed a framed photograph of the old church on the porch railing. Marcus accepted it reverently, understanding the weight it carried, decades of history, injustice, and resilience captured in faded black and white paper. "Keep it," she whispered. "Never let them erase this story again." Angela hugged her tightly, tears running down her cheeks, while Lily gently touched the photograph, feeling the weight of generations beneath her fingers. Across the street, families who had once turned away now stepped forward. They brought stories of ancestors who had lived in the neighborhood, of lands that had been seized, of neighbors intimidated into silence. Each voice added to a growing chorus of acknowledgement, a collective memory that had been buried for too long. Marcus felt a swell of emotion in his chest, a combination of grief, relief, and pride. The pain of generations had finally found recognition, and it began to lift. Inside the house, the damage was being repaired with care and attention. The broken window panes were replaced, the torn screens mended, and the burned and dented furniture restored or replaced. Every repair was a small act of reclamation, a declaration that violence would not define their home. Marcus moved with purpose, overseeing the work while holding Lily's hand, feeling the warmth of his family grounding him even as the memories of the previous night's chaos lingered. Angela hummed softly as she arranged flowers on the kitchen counter, a deliberate act of life and beauty reclaiming a space that had been marred by fear. The photographs, documents, and videos that had been recovered from the warehouse were carefully cataloged and shared with Clarissa James, their civil rights attorney. She had worked tirelessly to ensure that the evidence was preserved and presented to the public in a way that could not be ignored. Every piece of paper, every image, every recorded moment of truth was now a brick in a wall of accountability that would protect not only the Reeds but generations to come. Marcus watched as Clarissa and her team worked, their determination mirroring his own, and he felt a profound sense of justice slowly settling over him. By midday, the street outside the Reeds' home had become a gathering place for the community. Neighbors brought chairs, blankets, and umbrellas, forming an impromptu circle of solidarity. Children ran freely, laughter breaking through the lingering tension, while adults shared stories, recipes, and memories of resilience. Marcus watched the scene unfold, a lump rising in his throat. For years, fear and oppression had kept them divided. Now, love and truth were building bridges where walls had once stood. Lily ran to the porch railing, pointing at a group of children across the street. "Daddy, they're playing with me." Marcus smiled, lifting her onto the railing and letting her swing her legs. Angela joined him, her hand brushing against his, sharing a silent acknowledgement of their victory. They had survived violence, intimidation, and betrayal, yet here they were, whole, together, and stronger than before. The simple joy of a child's laughter became a beacon of hope, illuminating the path forward in a way that words alone could never capture. Mrs. Peterson shared stories of the old church and the congregation that had once gathered on that land. Her voice trembled, thick with emotion, as she described Sunday services, community gatherings, and the night of the attack that had been covered up for decades. The Reeds listened, absorbing every word, every detail. These were stories of pain, yes, but also stories of courage and faith. Angela placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, feeling the depth of the history now intertwined with their own journey. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity, and the neighborhood transformed from a place of tension into a sanctuary of solidarity. Neighbors painted fences, trimmed hedges, and repaired sidewalks, each small act of labor a gesture of defiance against the injustices that had been inflicted upon them. Marcus and Angela supervised quietly, allowing the community to reclaim its own space while feeling the profound weight of collective healing. As evening approached, the sun cast a golden hue over the street. Lanterns were lit, candles placed on windowsills, and the air was filled with the aroma of freshly baked pies and roasted vegetables. The Reeds' home, once a target of intimidation, had become a gathering point, a symbol of resilience and justice. Marcus stood on the porch watching as families shared stories and food, their laughter mingling with the soft hum of cicadas in the warm night air. Angela leaned against him, her bruises now fading but her spirit shining brighter than ever. "Look at them," she whispered. "They're not afraid anymore." Marcus nodded, feeling a deep swell of pride and relief. Fear had once been the language of the neighborhood. Now love, truth, and courage were speaking louder than ever. Lily clutched their hands, her small voice echoing across the yard. "We're safe, right, Daddy?" Marcus kissed her forehead, letting the warmth of her trust anchor him. "Yes, baby girl, we're safe, and we're stronger than ever." Mrs. Peterson handed Marcus a framed photograph, the last surviving image of the church before it was burned. He held it reverently, seeing the faces of the congregation and children frozen in time, a visual testament to the lives that had been erased and the legacy that now demanded recognition. "We can't forget," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying both reverence and determination. "We'll honor them, always." Angela and Lily stood beside him, each placing a hand on the frame, connecting past, present, and future in a moment of profound unity. The Reeds' home, the neighborhood, and the community had been forever changed. Where fear and oppression had once reigned, resilience and solidarity now thrived. Children played freely, families shared meals and stories, and the weight of history was being acknowledged with care and respect. Marcus, Angela, and Lily stood together, holding hands and breathing deeply, feeling the pulse of life, justice, and hope around them. In the quiet that followed, Marcus reflected on the journey, the threats, the violence, the betrayals, and the danger. Yet, all of it had led to this moment of triumph, a reclamation of dignity, history, and truth. The Reeds had fought not only for their family, but for generations who had been silenced, for a community that had been oppressed, and for a legacy that demanded recognition. The scars remained, but they were now markers of victory, not defeat. As night fell, the street glowed with lights, laughter, and shared meals. The Reeds stood on their porch, watching neighbors mingle. Children chase each other across the grass, and families reclaim the dignity that had been denied for so long. The golden glow of lanterns reflected in Marcus's eyes, mingling with tears of relief and pride. This was the power of truth, courage, and unwavering love. Lily leaned against Marcus, Angela's hand resting gently on his back. "We did it," Lily whispered. "We really did it." Marcus kissed her hair. "Yes, baby, we did it. And we'll keep doing it every day to make sure no one ever forgets." Angela smiled, the weight of worry replaced by the light of hope and restoration. The Reeds had survived, reclaimed their home, and restored the heart of their community. Where fear had once tried to dominate, love, courage, and truth now flourished. The neighborhood, once fractured by oppression and intimidation, had begun to heal. Marcus, Angela, and Lily, standing together on their porch, became a symbol of resilience, hope, and justice. The streets echoed with laughter and conversation, carrying the message that truth, courage, and love could never be silenced. The Reeds' story had become larger than themselves. It was now the story of a community reclaiming its voice, its history, and its power. As twilight deepened, Marcus, Angela, and Lily remained on the porch, watching the neighborhood bathe in a golden glow. The streets, once silent and tense, now hummed with life. The laughter of children echoed across yards, mingling with the soft conversations of neighbors reconnecting. The air smelled of evening blooms and baked bread, carrying with it the tangible weight of healing. Marcus drew a deep breath, letting the quiet hum of normalcy seep into his bones. It was fragile, delicate, yet profoundly real, a contrast to the chaos that had haunted them for weeks. Inside, the living room told a story of resilience. The broken furniture had been repaired, splintered wood replaced, and bullet holes patched carefully. Each mark, each repair, held meaning. They were reminders of the storm they had endured and the unyielding courage it had taken to survive. Angela moved among the rooms, gently placing objects in their new positions, restoring order while weaving warmth back into their home. Lily wandered beside her, collecting small mementos, a ribbon, a photograph, a stuffed animal, symbolic fragments of the childhood that violence had tried to steal. Outside, neighbors continued to arrive, bringing dishes, blankets, and words of support. Families that had once avoided the Reeds now came bearing gifts and apologies, carrying stories of their own struggles and hopes for unity. Marcus and Angela greeted each one with quiet pride, their hearts swelling at the sight of community reclaiming what had long been fractured. Children played freely, their laughter a melody of joy and relief that washed away the shadows of fear that had once dominated the street. Mrs. Peterson placed the framed photograph of the old church on the mantel, her hands trembling slightly. "Never forget," she said softly. Marcus accepted it with reverence, understanding that it represented more than history. It carried the weight of generations silenced, the echoes of a congregation whose lives had been violently disrupted. Angela's hand rested on Marcus's back, feeling the warmth of shared determination. Lily touched the glass gently, sensing the gravity of the past through its quiet stillness. Later, Marcus and Angela sat together at the kitchen table, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating the worn papers and photographs before them. Clarissa James had arrived earlier, documenting everything meticulously, ensuring that the story of injustice and resilience would reach far beyond their neighborhood. The land deeds, the photographs, the videos of last week's attack, and the carefully collected witness testimonies now formed an unassailable record. Marcus studied them, feeling the weight of both grief and hope. These documents told of betrayal, corruption, and violence, but also of truth, courage, and the indomitable human spirit. Lily leaned against Marcus's shoulder, whispering, "Daddy, will it ever be like this forever?" Marcus hugged her tightly, letting the warmth of her small body remind him of why they had fought so fiercely. "We'll protect this, baby girl. We'll honor the past and build a future where you can grow without fear. This is just the beginning." Angela's hand found his, fingers intertwining in silent agreement. They were a family bound not only by blood, but by shared purpose and enduring courage. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink, purple, and gold. The Reeds' home stood at the center of this quiet revolution, a symbol of resistance, survival, and hope. Marcus walked through the living room, pausing to look at each photograph, each document, and each memento of struggle. He traced his fingers along the frame of the old church photo, imagining the faces of those who had once gathered there, their laughter, their prayers, their lives abruptly interrupted by hatred and greed. He whispered a vow that they would not be forgotten, that their fight would become a beacon for others. Angela joined him, placing a hand over his heart. "We're doing more than protecting ourselves," she said softly. "We're honoring them, and teaching Lily, and everyone watching, that courage and truth can prevail." Marcus nodded, the ache of past injustices mingling with a profound sense of purpose. He had fought for his family, for justice, and now he fought to preserve the memory of those who had been silenced. In the distance, the sound of evening traffic mingled with the laughter of children still playing under the soft glow of streetlights. The neighborhood, once fractured by fear and suspicion, now vibrated with connection. Families shared meals on porches, neighbors exchanged stories, and the Reeds' home had become the symbolic heart of it all. Marcus and Angela stood together, watching as their community, once divided, began to knit itself back together. Lily ran to the porch railing, holding a small lantern she had found, her eyes bright with curiosity and triumph. "Look, Daddy! It's glowing!" Marcus knelt beside her, lifting her gently and holding the lantern in his hands. The soft light illuminated their faces, reflecting both the innocence of childhood and the hard-won relief of safety. Angela watched them, feeling the weight of the past months dissolve into hope. Each small act, the sharing of food, the laughter of children, the acknowledgement of history, was a triumph over the darkness that had once threatened to consume them. As night settled, Marcus, Angela, and Lily stood together on the porch, the Reeds' home bathed in the soft glow of lanterns and the warm lights of neighboring houses. They were no longer victims of fear or intimidation. They were survivors, protectors, and witnesses to justice finally realized. The land they had reclaimed carried the memory of those who had been silenced, and the family that now stood upon it embodied both resilience and hope. Marcus took Lily's hand and placed it in Angela's, forming an unbroken circle of love and determination. "We have done more than survive," he said quietly. "We've reclaimed this space, honored the past, and created a future where truth and courage will guide us." Angela rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the unspoken strength in his words. Lily pressed her small face against their hands, a tangible reminder that love, family, and justice could thrive even after unimaginable pain. The night air carried the sounds of a community healing, of laughter, conversation, and quiet acts of reconciliation. Marcus and Angela stood together, absorbing the weight and beauty of what they had built. This was more than a home. It was a testament to resilience, truth, and the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. History had been remembered, love had been restored, and justice had been served. And for the Reeds, that was enough. Morning light spilled across the Reed family's front yard, warming the freshly repaired porch and the newly painted door. Marcus lingered at the threshold, watching neighbors arrive with quiet smiles and cautious nods. The air smelled faintly of earth and sun-baked pavement, a subtle reminder that life moved forward even after storms of violence and betrayal. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a nearby yard, mingling with the scent of jasmine and the distant hum of the city waking. Marcus felt a deep, resonant joy mingled with sorrow, a feeling almost too heavy to name. Inside, the living room was a tableau of resilience. Broken chairs had been mended, scorched wood replaced, and every scar of the previous night's assault carefully preserved as a testament to survival. Photographs of the burned church, once forgotten and hidden, now stood alongside images of families who had gathered there, smiling, vibrant, full of hope and life. Each picture carried with it stories of courage and loss, of a community silenced by fear and greed but never truly defeated. Angela moved slowly among them, her hands caressing the frames as if to offer reassurance that their history would endure. Lily trailed beside her mother, collecting a small ribbon and a faded prayer card, holding them close to her chest as if she could physically cradle the memory of generations past. Out in the yard, neighbors continued to arrive, bringing trays of food, flowers, and quiet gestures of solidarity. Families who had once turned away, eyes averted in fear or suspicion, now came bearing gifts and apologies, sharing stories of their own battles with prejudice and exclusion. The Reeds welcomed them with warmth and gratitude, allowing themselves to feel a collective relief and connection that had been denied for far too long. Children ran barefoot across the lawn, their shrieks of joy and excitement a tangible celebration of reclaimed innocence. Marcus watched Lily chase after a neighbor's dog, her laughter ringing like a bell of hope across the street. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly neighbor who had witnessed the community's past and present struggles, placed a framed photograph of the old church on the mantel. "Never forget," she whispered. Marcus took the photograph in his hands, feeling the gravity of the past settle into his chest. This image was more than a relic. It was a call to remember, to honor, to act. Angela's hand rested gently on his shoulder, grounding him, reminding him of the strength in their unity. Lily touched the glass with small fingers, sensing without words the weight of the legacy before her. By midday, Clarissa James had arrived with her camera and a careful stack of documents. She moved through the house and yard like a conductor, orchestrating the preservation of evidence with precise care. Every photograph, deed, video, and written account of injustice was cataloged, cross-referenced, and secured. Marcus studied them, feeling both sorrow and vindication. Each document told of betrayal, of deliberate harassment, and of corruption, but also of courage, resilience, and the unwavering commitment to justice. The story of the past decades, once buried, now has a voice and visibility. Lily climbed onto Marcus's lap, resting her head against his chest. "Daddy, is it safe now?" she whispered, her voice trembling with lingering fear. Marcus held her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair and the warmth of her small body. "Yes, baby girl," he replied, his voice steady and calm, though it carried the weight of what had been endured. "We've reclaimed our home, we've honored the past, and we've shown that courage and truth will always find a way." Angela joined them, her arms encircling both father and daughter, forming a protective cocoon of love, resilience, and quiet victory. The neighborhood, once fractured by fear and suspicion, now pulsed with a renewed sense of community. Families shared meals on porches, exchanged stories, and celebrated survival. The Reeds' home became the symbolic heart of this transformation, a beacon that radiated hope, truth, and justice. Marcus walked through each room, pausing to touch photographs and documents, allowing himself a quiet moment to acknowledge both the pain and triumph they embodied. Each piece told a story, a testament that evil could not erase, and that history could be reclaimed by those willing to fight for it. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, Marcus, Angela, and Lily stood together on the porch. Lanterns glowed softly around them, reflecting off the faces of neighbors who had come to witness, to share, and to celebrate. Marcus lifted Lily into his arms, holding her up to the sky. "This is more than a house," he said softly. "It's a legacy. It's proof that love, truth, and courage endure. That we endure." Angela rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the solidity of their shared purpose and the quiet triumph of survival. The evening brought with it the gentle sounds of a community healing, laughter, conversation, and the soft hum of music and movement. Marcus watched as neighbors began to dance, share meals, and celebrate togetherness, their shared experiences knitting the fabric of trust and understanding that had been long absent. This home, once a site of terror and injustice, had become a sanctuary and a symbol of resilience, a place where love and courage could flourish. Mrs. Peterson approached, carrying a small framed photograph. "For you," she said, placing it in Marcus's hands. It was a picture of the church before it was burned, filled with worshipers in their Sunday best, their eyes full of hope and determination. Marcus studied it closely, feeling the weight of generations resting in his hands. "We can't let this be forgotten," he murmured. Angela and Lily leaned against him, feeling the shared strength of memory, love, and justice. The Reeds stood together, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. The warmth of community, the triumph over injustice, and the reclamation of history flowed through them, filling every corner of their hearts. They had survived. They had fought. They had honored the past and created a future where truth, courage, and love prevailed. And in that moment, surrounded by family and community, Marcus, Angela, and Lily finally allowed themselves to breathe. The battle had been long, painful, and fraught, but it had also illuminated the power of resilience, the triumph of justice, and the unbreakable bonds of family and community. The Reeds had not only reclaimed a home, they had reclaimed dignity, history, and hope. And the world, for the first time in decades, was watching, remembering, and learning that courage and truth could never be silenced. Outro. This is a story of courage, of love, and of standing firm when the world seems determined to break you. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the truth can shine, and those who fight for justice can change the course of history. If this story moved you, if it made your heart race, made your spirit ache, or even made you smile through the pain, don't let the journey end here. Subscribe to Racist Reality, turn on notifications, and join us for more stories that will grip your soul, challenge your heart, and leave you thinking long after the screen goes dark. Countless stories are waiting to be told, stories of bravery, of love, and of the human spirit refusing to back down. Click on the channel now, watch the next video, and let yourself be inspired. Your next unforgettable story on racist reality is just a click away.